My name is Dave Miller. As most of you know, I am the program director here at the Alliance, and I use he, him, his pronouns. And we're just going to get right into it after we do acknowledge that yesterday, I feel like every week, we hit a new milestone. Yesterday was another milestone in our country with crossing 150,000 deaths and over 4 million cases. And you don't have to look far to find data all over the place around what's going on. And I know there are a lot of folks working real hard. I heard the FDA is looking at trying to get a at-home test out there for folks. So lots and lots of people working really hard to help us get out of this awful situation. But despite that, we are in a tough spot, and unfortunately, a lot of people have lost their lives and family members. And so with that, we're going to, as we do every week, and we'll continue to do, take a moment of silence to mark their passing. So please join me. Okay. With that, we're going to go ahead and pivot. And so I want to introduce somebody that I'm pretty sure most of you have met in some form or fashion over the last year, if not longer, and that is Sammy Moon, who is the Executive Director of the Mississippi Alliance. And we also have the pleasure of having with us Ben Walker. He is and I'm going to read this off my screen so I don't mess it up because it's a lot. Let's see here. Ben Walker is the project manager for the Family and Children Research Unit of the Social Science Research Center from Mississippi State University. That is a mouthful. But they have been working together for quite a long time, especially as the Alliance has really tried to make sure that we are providing valuable research and data on a variety of topics to our network and to the field, and really trying to be a valuable contributor in the conversation. And so with that, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Ben and Sammy. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it, and thanks to all of you again for being on this morning and coming in to learn about what we have learned about philanthropy and about the impact of philanthropy in the state. Let me begin by just giving you the context for this conversation this morning. Back before the Alliance, when there were two separate organizations, the Association of Grant Makers and the Center for Nonprofits, MAG, the Grant Makers Association, one of the first questions that was asked when I came on board as the first part-time staff was, well, what is the scope and scale of philanthropy in the state? And frankly, at that point, nobody could answer that question, because you'll recall from previous conversations at that point, MAG was a little chat and chew organization that folks had a sandwich every 6 months or so and talked about grants. So one of the first things that we had to do was begin the research on to answer that question. What is the scope and scale of philanthropy? So that was back in 2015, and the first philanthropy report was put out that year. We have just updated that report, and so Ben is going to, in a few minutes, talk you through the findings of the latest update of that philanthropy report. I think it's important for you for a couple of reasons. One, if you're in the world of philanthropy, it really does tell you where you fit in that world. It tells you who else is interested in the issues that you're interested in, tells you geographically where those funders are located, and it just gives you a very comprehensive picture of philanthropy in the state. If you're a nonprofit, I think it's very relevant to you, because if you're looking for money, if you're trying to figure out who is funding in the area that you're working in, the philanthropy report will tell you that. It gives you the largest funders in the different priority areas that the funders are working in. It gives you a picture not only of Mississippi philanthropy, but of national philanthropy as well. And one of the interesting pieces to the research that Ben will mention, I'm sure, is there's a lot of outside money, outside philanthropic dollars that come into Mississippi. And so a lot of times we get focused on, well, who in Mississippi is funding in the area that you're working in, when that's an important question, but it's also equally important of who outside the state is funding in that arena. So I think it has applicability to both philanthropy and nonprofits, and Ben will do a great job of making it come alive for you so that it's not just a recitation of numbers. So that's one piece we'll talk about this morning. The first one I want to begin talking about, though, is our annual report. And Ben, if we can move to the slide that has the cover of the annual report, that would be wonderful.
Is that not showing up? I'm trying to move.
The intro slide is showing up, the weekly webinar.
Yeah, it's telling me my app is paused.
Uh-oh, that could be a real...
I can put up the cover of the report.
Okay, I'm going to just go ahead and start talking about it. And when you can, get the picture up there. Let me say at this point, we realized early on that we needed a data partner, a research partner, because it's kind of like when you put Sammy Moon with technology, it's the deer in the headlight syndrome. You put Sammy Moon with numbers and data and algorithms and all that kind of stuff, it's two deer in the headlights. So I realized very early on that if we were going to have a role of getting clear on the scope, scale, and impact of philanthropy and nonprofits, we needed help. So it was a wonderful opportunity to build a partnership with the Social Science Research Center at Mississippi State. And we have continued that partnership now since the very beginning. They are our go-to folks. So if I can without reservation say, if you have data, research needs, or just questions that you want answered, the Social Science Research Center is a valued and valuable resource for you. So they're our partners, so call on them if you need help. I do want to start though by talking about the first ever annual report that we've done. And it's the first annual report because it's the first time we have a year's worth of work as the Alliance under our belt. So I was just ecstatic when we started talking about being able to put together an annual report. And I want to give credit to Fahrenheit Communications and Jason Thompson and his team on this work. They were fantastic to work with in helping us develop this annual report and putting it together and getting the look and feel of the annual report. And you can see on your screen the cover of the annual report. All of these reports, by the way, are available on our website. So, please download or please go to the website, take a look at them, because there's a lot of information here that I think could be helpful to you. But as far as the annual report goes, it is, like I said, the first time that we've had the opportunity to do an annual report, and it covers the history of how the Alliance was formed, why the Alliance was formed, what our mission, values, and vision has been and continues to be for the Alliance. It talks about who we're serving. It talks about you as members of the Alliance. It really paints a comprehensive picture of what not only programmatically and content-wise has been done over the first year of operations of the Alliance, but it also gives you the financial picture for the Alliance. So it is an important document. It is a well-done document. It is a document of which we are all very, very proud. So I have had several people say, when you get the printed copies of this, would you let me have some for the coffee table in my waiting room, that, you know, just to have to distribute. So if you take a look at this annual report and you want some to be able to share with your members or your clients or your staff, please just let us know, because it is a wonderful piece of work, I think. And while there is still a huge amount of work to be done, I think it reflects a year of hard work and reorganization and retooling, and I lift this up to you, and like I say, it's available on the website. The other piece that of research that we have done is one in, I talked about the philanthropy report already. There was another piece that came with the question of what is the scope and scale of philanthropy, and that was around, well, what is the impact of philanthropy? So we found out that there were a group of economists at LSU that had used a model, an economic model, to take the grant making that is done in a place, in this case in the state of Mississippi, and translate it again through magic of economic analysis and whatever process they use into, well, what is the economic impact of the grants that have been made? So another piece that you will hear some amazing data from at the end of Ben's presentation is what this piece, which is on your screen now, that's called the Economic and Social Impact of Mississippi Philanthropic Grants. First time we've ever had this data. It's a great tool when you're talking with elected officials or public sector folks or policy arena. People don't usually think in terms, they think in terms of the heart and what you're doing programmatically and what difference the grants are making for clients. We don't usually think about what is the economic return on that, what is the return on investment. This piece for the first time gives us the answer to that question, and we'll talk about that at the end of Ben's report. I've already mentioned the philanthropy report. That's the third piece we'll talk about, and it's the one that we actually will start with. So with that set up, let me call on Ben, who is going to walk you through the major findings from the philanthropic report, and then conclude with a couple of data slides on the economic impact of grant making in Mississippi. All of these, again, are on our website. So we'll answer questions when we get to the Q&A. But Ben, let me turn to you at this point.
Ben, do you need me to share the PowerPoint or?
No, could maybe just give me permission to share my screen. We'll see if that'll work.
Okay, let's check that out. Okay. Fourth time is the charm, folks. Technology. I left my rabbit's foot at home.
As we learned, it's your friend until it isn't.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
See, this is the point where I would totally have the deer in the headlight look. There you go.
There we go. All right. And Ben, are you able to make it? There you go. Okay, great.
Okay, great. Are you seeing that I'm at key findings now?
It is a beautiful white screen.
Okay, great. So you're not seeing anything on the.
No, Ben, if you want to just send me the updated version and talk through it a little bit, and let's see here.
There it is.
You know,
Yeah,
I
it might
think
just
what's
be easiest
happening
to
is
keep
when
it
I'm going to the sort of slideshow mode,
Yeah,
it's doing that. So I will just go through it
great.
this way. Will that work?
Yeah, that works, Ben. If you look at the bottom of your screen on the right side, you'll see the plus and minus for zoom in. If you'll just zoom in a little bit, and folks of you who are watching, if you would like to zoom in as well, if you scroll over on your screen on the right-hand side, you'll see a little side panel that has a picture of a camera, a plus button, a minus button, and a copy button. You can also zoom in on your own as well. So Ben, if that's a perfect size right there, and then participants and attendees, if you all need to zoom in further, you can do that as well.
Okay, well, I'll just get into it. And I really do hope you like data, because there will be a lot of it. And Sammy mentioned sort of that we're going to talk about sort of the major findings, but really it's sort of going to be a tour of the report. And I'm going to go through pretty much most of the content of the report. And so, you know, just one caveat is that I won't be able to go into stuff in a whole lot of depth, but I'm really going to try and leave enough time to have some discussion about what you might be interested from this. And I would definitely encourage you to download the report. And so that being said, I did want to talk about a few key findings now, sort of the high level stuff from the report that you should know. And the first is that the total amount of giving was 95 million from 299 foundations, and 58 million was given by non-Mississippi based foundations. As Sammy mentioned, there is a lot of that coming from outside the state, and most of the grant dollars stayed in Mississippi. So when you think about where are grant dollars being sent, there are $1.5 billion in assets for Mississippi foundations. And when you look at the types of places the grants go in terms of subject areas, most went to education, health, then human services and economic development. And we do have a little bit in here on public charities. Sammy talked about this being something that we wanted to get into more, and there's something that I know the Alliance is interested in investigating more in the future, but there are a lot of assets in grant making coming from public charities. And also just within public charities, United Ways of Mississippi are one of the largest, and they gave over $9 million in grants. So just a few quick notes about how we did this. The grants are all for fiscal year 2016, and these are from a list of 299 Mississippi foundations. And the data is essentially pulled from IRS 990 forms. In addition to that, we're able to index some of these grants in terms of the specific content in the grants from 299 foundations. And I should say that the way that these are classified is based on a sort of taxonomy. Not to go into too much sort of detail on this, but it's based on a classification system, and we also did some geographical analysis, which I'll get into. And if you have any questions about how we did this, I'm happy to answer that.
Ben, actually, just one real quick, we have a comment from Sammy. Would you mind just for a second talking about the difference between a public charity and a foundation?
Yeah, so the foundations, you know, there's some demarcation in terms of where they get the money, and pretty much the way that the Foundation Center, or now Candid, thinks about it is that the public charities get most of their money from individual donations. And so when I get to the next slide, I'll talk about some of the different kinds of grant-making foundations that we have included here. I don't know if that was clear or not in terms of the public charities.
So Ben, it's basically based on where the money comes from for that grant making effort, right? So
yeah, and also how they identify themselves in terms of tax purposes.
yeah,
So there's
yeah,
probably things that go into it that I don't really fully understand, but that's my understanding. And there might be folks actually on the meeting who might know more about that, depending on what their sort of involvement is in charities and in philanthropies.
great, thank you.
So this looks at the amount of giving from each of these kinds of foundations, and the vast majority of foundations in Mississippi are independent foundations. So sort of the classic, private foundation, and they account for 85% of all the assets among grant makers and 66% of total giving. Community foundations, even though there's only a few of them, really make up a large fraction relative to their number of the assets and total giving. And then, following that is the corporate foundations, and then the operating foundations. So looking at the total giving over time, you can kind of see that during the first half of the 2000s, grant making went up about until the time of the recession. And you see in 2002 here, there was a big spike in grant making, which was due to a large grant from the Common Fund Trust. And you can see that grant making kind of went down after the recession, but it's kind of picking back up. And it'll be interesting to see in the next few years what's sort of happened given everything that's going on with grant making. But there's sort of a lag in terms of looking at trends in grants because of the processing with the IRS and when those 990s become available for analysis. Here we show the top 10 foundations by giving. And this is, this first slide here references the report from 2015. So these are the 2012 numbers. And you can kind of look through this and see sort of who's there in the top 10. The Mississippi Common Fund Trust was the top grant maker in terms of total giving. And if we go over to the latest report, there's been some, the general folks there are the same, but there's been some shifts within. Most notably, the Create Foundation rose several spots in terms of total giving. So as Sammy was sort of mentioning, it's important to know where grant dollars are going. So when we look at grants awarded by Mississippi foundations in 2016, the vast majority, in terms of if you just look at grant dollars, 80.5% of the grant dollars went to Mississippi recipients, and 67% of the actual grants went to Mississippi recipients. An equally important question is asked where the grant dollars came from that were awarded to Mississippi recipients. So about 45% of the grant dollars came from Mississippi Foundation, but other US-based foundations accounted for 54.5% of the dollars and 65.1% of the actual grants. And so when you break down, well, who are those most important out-of-state funders? It's sort of the predictable players here. WK Kellogg Foundation really invests a ton of money in Mississippi, You can see they gave in 2016 $15.6 million in grants to Mississippi-based recipients. So one of the things that the Alliance was eager to do in this report is to look at what are the specific funding priorities. So, this analysis looked at using these 990s based on what we could gather from the descriptions in those 990s. What are these grants going to? And also understanding what kind of recipients they're going to. So when you sort of look at this breakdown, the biggest priority in terms of grant dollars is education. So these grants accounted for $26.4 million. And see, this is in the way. And health would be the next one, human services and community economic development. And when you further break down education, since that's the sort of highest area, higher education accounts for about 30% of those education grants, followed by graduate and professional, and then elementary and secondary education.
And then those grant numbers that put higher education at the highest includes the university foundations, correct?
Yes, and that is really what you're looking at.
Yeah.
By and large, is giving to those university foundations. So really, yes. And so using the taxonomy system that I mentioned before, we can also look at things like what population groups were targeted. And really, this kind of gets back to the education piece. When we say academics, that means students. And then children and youth were also a large portion of the grant dollars, and economically disadvantaged individuals. So now I'm gonna go into sort of the geospatial kind of piece of this. And it was interesting because we have information about the location of the recipients. We can say something about where these grants are going geographically. So you see the darker bar, what that's showing is the 2012, and the lighter bar shows the 2016. So you can see that the capital area got the most grants in both sets of years, but there's been a really big shift in that over time, is so that the capital recipients have gone from accounting for 29% of the grant dollars all the way up to 48%. And there's also been a notable increase in the grants going to recipients in Northeast Mississippi. And again, a lot of that probably has to do with this increase that we observed with the CREATE Foundation and their grant making. You can also think of this in terms of congressional districts. And in general, the 3rd congressional district, both in 2012 and 2016, has had the most grants paid. And that's become even more so the case in the latest report. And so here what we're showing is where did the grants go in terms of the volume of grant dollars in terms of recipients by county. And what you see is pretty much as expected, is that Hinds County and sort of the Jackson metro area, if you include Madison, get the largest number of grant dollars, and then Lee would be second. So it's sort of, if you combine the Jackson metro area, it'd be far and away the largest in terms of those counties, followed by Madison, Lafayette, and Lauderdale. So, and just to clarify, so it's clear when I get to the next slide, we're talking about here where the grant makers are. So if I didn't make that clear, this is the giving by location. So you think about the amount of grant dollars going out of the county based on where the grant maker is in the 990. Here we have the opposite, which is where are the grant dollars going? So this is based on the county of the recipient. So still pretty similar story in terms of Hinds County, Lafayette, but we also have here a lot of grant dollars going to recipients in Harrison County and Oktibbeha and Forest. So the sort of university areas are all represented here in the top 5, but then you also have recipients in the coast and then Hinds County. So another interesting thing that we're able to do, because we know, again, where the grant dollars are going, we know what the grant dollars are for, we can sort of look at, we can overlay these grant dollars over sort of the contextual issue around the grant. So what we did here was, what you see on the map in the colored sort of tiles is the education attainment in each county. So the darker the county is, the higher the educational attainment is. And then we overlay what's the grant dollars going in that area. So it kind of give us a sense of, are these education dollars going where they're most needed? And help us think about how these could be prioritized based on the amount of need or risk in a given county. So you can see that the really what we see actually is that these grant dollars go where there really already is sort of the highest education attainment, and some of that's sort of predictable, where you have a lot of these, again, because these education grants include not just primary school and secondary school, but you have post-secondary, four-year colleges, and so on. So I think that's a lot of what you're seeing there. We did a similar thing with health. In the background, you see the overall health ranking of the county based on countyhealthrankings.com, and the volume of grant dollars or the size of grants in each really at their where they occurred in terms of their latitude and longitude. And this is also similar, where they have a lot of health infrastructure. You see a lot of these large grants, but unfortunately, in sort of the Delta areas, there's relatively fewer grants, and they're of smaller sizes. So you don't see these really large multi-million-dollar grants happening there. So what you see here is the grants for arts and culture, and what you see on the map is the distribution of dollars for arts and culture recipients across each county, with what we have here is the location of museums. So this is a little different in that this is probably more dispersed, and you have a lot of museums in places where there might not be a large concentration of grant dollars. So again, one thing that Sammy mentioned at the outset is that, you know, public charities are absolutely a significant part of grant making in Mississippi. And so I wanted to show this slide, and this is in the report. We don't have, you know, a full section on grant making public charities, but we do have a few pages devoted to this because they are a significant grant maker in the state. And just to give you a sense of this, the total giving among grant-making public charities in Mississippi was $217 million, and the total assets are $3 billion. And when you combine the grant-making public charities with those 299 private foundations that we use in the main part of the report, they actually represent 66% of all grant dollars in Mississippi in terms of their total giving, and 69% of assets among grant makers. So they are definitely not a sector that can be overlooked in terms of grant making in the state. And we sort of did a similar kind of breakdown of the top 10 public charity foundations. And we only have 2016 here because we did not have this kind of data in our first report. So we were intentional about trying to get some additional data on charities in this report. And so the Mississippi State University Foundation, and you see that you also have the Delta Health Alliance and some of these folks. So this is the top 10 among the grant-making public charities. But I did want to mention that if you go to the report and download that, we also include the top 50 if you want to see some of the other that are outside the top 10. And so among public charities, United Ways really have engaged in significant grant making across the state, and they've provided more than $10 million in grant dollars to Mississippi recipients. And when you factor them into the foundation giving, 10% of all grant dollars come from a United Way. So that is really, really significant. And they've had about the same amount of giving since the 2012 report. And they, you know, are really close to about 10%. They were 10% in 2012, and they're 8.8% now. And so something that we include in the report is there was a legislative initiative that passed in August of 2019, or not August 2019, but in 2019 legislative session that provides a tax credit to qualifying gifts to community foundations. And so unfortunately, these data are already woefully out of date. These are as of August 2019 when we were sort of wrapping up the report. But what you can see is that even within the first year, there was a significant amount of qualifying donations. So this table here breaks down where these qualifying donations went in terms of the actual community foundation. And the Community Foundation of East Mississippi had about 13.3% of these gifts. And the Community Foundation of Washington County, they had the largest percentage of gifts. And then the Create Foundation actually got $430,000 of qualifying gifts. And you can see here on the far right, this shows the amount of credits that are being received from these gifts. So the Pine Belt Foundation had $109,000 of tax credit, and so the total amount of tax credit by this time was $360,000.
And just a quick addition to that comment on this is that what we have found with the Endow Mississippi effort is a lot of the donors to this are exactly what we wanted. They're new donors. They're not the old mega gift donors. Endow Mississippi has really increased the giving base in the $5,000 and $10,000 gift range with new donors and younger donors coming in. So part of what you're seeing is not only the increase in resources, but the building of a new giver base as well. So that's a real positive thing.
Yes, and so I'd really be interested to see where this is at now, because a lot of the time has passed. And I remember working on this, that this was changing constantly as we were going through. And so we tried to include this as late as we could in the process. And as Sammy mentioned, you know, this report, you know, once we had these results, the Alliance was really interested, and so we know we have a better idea of the scope and scale of grant making in the state. So what is the economic impact of all this grant making? And so we worked with a group out of LSU to examine this question. And so what they did is they took really the data that I've just presented to you and, you know, applied some economic techniques to look at what the ROI was and what the social benefit is. And so really there's 3 takeaways on this report. I would certainly encourage you to download that report because there's really a lot of detail in there, but you know, there's really just sort of 3 things I'd keep in mind. One is that the ROI, when you look at it, there's kind of a range depending on the studies that you're using, but it varies in the sort of the area that you're looking at. So some sectors have a larger ROI than others, which is why I would definitely look at the report. So depending on what you're looking at, what kind of grants, it varies from just a 1-to-1 all the way to $17 saved per dollar invested at the high end. So you definitely want to look at that. And then the total social benefit for grant making is $106 million. For the $106 million spent is $882 million. So you do have a lot of social benefit. And so this, when I say social benefit, we look at more than just the direct economic impacts. You look at things like, you know, how does grant making reduce things like incarceration rates or improve things like education attainment and sort of these social benefits which have these long-term impacts, right? So really that is huge. And so when you look at the average ROI in Mississippi, it's 8.3 or about $8.28 of benefit for every $1 invested in grant making and philanthropic activity. And I should say that we only looked at this in the economic report in terms of the foundations, the private grant making foundations that those 299. So this could be even larger potentially by including grant making public charities. And so, yeah, I really blew through this, but we have lots of time to go back to any particular slides that we want to talk about in depth or to answer any questions that you might have. And so, yeah, Dave, I don't know how you want to handle it. I don't know if there's maybe stuff in the chat box or how y'all typically do questions, but I'll just sit back and wait for how you want to address that.
And there is a question in the chat box that says, is the ROI the most recent number?
So the ROI is based on when these grants occurred. So it's the most recent number in the sense that these grant dollars are the most recent grant dollars that we have. But this could be redone for the grants that are available now in principle, which I think by now the 2017 grants are certainly available, and maybe even the 2018 grants. But this ROI analysis is based on grant making that occurred in 2016.
Do we have any other questions that we would like to throw out there? Or comments?
Everybody may feel like they just have been drinking from a fire hose. There's kind of that deer in the headlight look for a few people, but it's a lot of data, and you know.
Sammy, you mentioned that you've heard from folks that when it's printed, they might want to pop it on their coffee tables in their offices. What's the timeline, do you know, for when people will be able to get a printed copy of the report?
Well, the philanthropic report and the economic report are printed and available now. The annual report is at the printer as we speak. So within the next week to 10 days, we should have that back from the printer.
Great. And should they just email Connect at Alliance to get a copy of that, or give us a call?
Yeah, that would be fine. We'd be happy to send them out.
Wonderful. Do we have anything else we need to cover, or are we ready for the next piece?
I hope, I'm just wrapping up. I mean, I hope that, you know, getting all of this information that you, as I like to say, will noodle on it and think about how it relates to the work you're doing, or how you could use it, or whether there's information in there that your board would be interested in knowing, or whether, you know, we want it to be, in addition to the academic exercise of just doing the research and the report, we want it to be applied. We want it to be usable. We want it to be, you know, user friendly. If you have, well, started to say, if you have meetings coming up, we could do a presentation, but everything's virtual now. But if you have virtual meetings coming up, and you know, you have the opportunity that with a group that you would like to share this information with, they might find interesting, holler at us, because we're all working virtually as well.
I do see, thank you, Sammy. I see a comment in the chat from Caitlin, and let's see here. Oops, it just disappeared. It'd be helpful to know which philanthropic organizations do not accept unsolicited requests. Is that, Sammy or Ben, any comment on that?
That's data. I mean, we don't have that data included in the report, and that's something that we would have to do on the side, Dave, is collect that. It would be interesting. Most grant-making organizations, if you go to their website, will tell you whether they accept unsolicited proposals or not. So, you know, what we have encouraged our philanthropic partners to do is build a relationship, to get to know the people who are looking for money, to work together, to communicate much more so than in the past. So, you know, that's not directly tied to whether they take an unsolicited proposal or not, but it's kind of the new mantra that we're putting out there is unsolicited proposals are fine, but you still may not know the people that you're dealing with, so build a relationship.
Absolutely. I see a comment from Teresa with the Community Foundation. Maybe the next meeting we can give an update on Endow, Mississippi. I don't have the data now, but she can put it together. Teresa, let's definitely, let's chat about that so we can get you on the calendar. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I can say to that comment that this year's Endow money is being used up. It's not being used up quite as quickly as last year's. And I think that's directly related to COVID and kind of the skittishness, if that's a word, of some donors now within the economic climate and political climate and health climate that we're all in. Had a long conversation yesterday with Mike Claiborne at Create Foundation, and he was indicating that, you know, while there are donors that are still giving, there are others that are still waiting, kind of in a wait and see attitude for this year. And so I think that's why the endow dollars aren't flying out. But by the end of the the year, those tax credits will be gone.
Wonderful. I think Ben and Sammy, I think we are ready to transition to some closing items, unless you have anything else to add. Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Ben. You know this next part's coming, and it's your favorite part of the entire thing. No offense, Ben or Sammy, but it's my favorite part too. I'm going to get my salesman hat on. All right, here we go, folks. So you saw hot off the press earlier this week, and don't nobody leave. I'm watching the count number of the people in the room. Hot off the press is our August training calendar. We really tried very hard to incorporate a very diverse range of topics on here. And again, I really want to reiterate, think about your whole team. Don't just think about if this is something that would be appealing to you. Think about the people who you work with every day and whether or not this would be of value to them. Our special pricing is still in effect. And these are recorded. So if for some reason there's a conflict, you can always get a recorded copy as well. I want to lift up a couple of things. One, although you did miss it yesterday, and shame on you for that, but we did have our executive director roundtable, our first one. It was phenomenal. It was a focus on women of color, a truly powerful event, and we're working on looking at some ways that we can make that accessible to people who are not in the room. So some more to come on that. But this is going to be a regular part of our monthly offering, and our next one is going to be a focus on executive directors in Mississippi who are immigrants. So a really interesting dialogue, and one that often is not talked about or discussed or looked at. So really interesting. The other thing I want to lift up is a presentation that is taking place on Friday next week. Aligning your fundraising career with your personal values. We have a new trainer who is going to be joining us, Crystal Cherry. She is in Atlanta and is a terrific presenter, works across the country, and she is going to be giving a truly powerful presentation. She just did this with another group with I think several hundred people. So you can get in a small group presentation and meet her one-on-one, or well, maybe not one-on-one, but in a small group setting. So definitely take advantage and register as soon as possible. And the other thing, let's see here, before we leave is, you know, we're often rushing to wrap up because we have presentations that are packed with wonderful content. But I would like for us to take a second and have a few minutes of community forum. So tell us what's going on with you. Tell us what's happening with your organizations. Do you have any good news? Do you have any announcements you need to make? Information to share? This is a chance for all of us to connect. So feel free, the podium is open.
May I say something, Dave? This is Rebecca.
Sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to the report that Ben gave and would like to encourage everyone, if you've not read the original report about why this whole alliance came to be, I highly recommend that. I have to admit that I would never have thought that grant makers and nonprofits were miscommunicating so much prior to that. I mean, there was this, you would think that everybody's thinking the same thing, and there was an absolute disconnect. And it went a long way toward helping me understand my role and to be able to see the way that grant makers see what nonprofits do. So Ben, I want to thank you and your organization for doing that research and the most recent report as well. I would never want to have to gather that kind of data. I think it would be mind-blowing to even attempt it. But the results are fascinating, and I just want to thank you for all the work you've done.
Wonderfully said. Thank you, Rebecca.
Hey, this
Anybody else?
is Lori from Crime Stoppers.
Hey, Lori.
Hey, since we last met, we had our rollout for our kiosk, our community and crime fighting kiosk, and the Walmart in Biloxi. We have a verbal for a Pascagoula one and also a Gulfport one. So when individuals are shopping in Walmart, they are able to see wanted, missing, but also community information. Like today, we posted about a big traffic alert, a road closure in Biloxi. So we're really excited. This is really great because you know the traffic that Walmart sees, and Walmart has been a good partner. They've not given us any money on this, which is fine. They are just letting us have it in their stores, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Phenomenal. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Who's the brave soul that's going next? It's one click away.
All right, Dave, you shame me into it. This is
All
Stuart from the
right.
Humanities Council. We give grants to fund kind of public humanities programs, and in COVID, we really pivoted to supporting virtual programs. And so Thursday, August 6th, and I'm trying to dig it out of my email because unfortunately it's not yet on our website calendar. I'm going to get that corrected as soon as this is over. We have a virtual grant writing workshop for our grants, so not really general grants, but if your organization, it's August 6th at 10 a.m. And I'm going to put an email address in the chat of how you RSVP for it. But if you would like to learn about how to do programs or would like how to get funding, if they're based in the humanities, we'd love to have you participate. It's free. And that's it.
And does that mean that if I want to improve my stick figure drawing, that I as an individual can apply for that grant, or is this for organizations?
It's for organizations, and I just shared it privately, so now we got to share it with everyone. Yeah, this is the email address to register for our Mississippi Humanities Council grant writing workshop with the particular emphasis on virtual programs.
Okay, wonderful. All right, everybody, it is 9. Oop, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a nerd, I've actually have a couple friends who are working on writing scripts that deal with what we're doing right now and figuring out ways to perform. Are there still monies available that they can apply for grants through the Humanities Council that go back to the Endowment for the Arts? Like, can they still do that?
So we're funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. We have funded theatrical productions when they're based on kind of historical and humanities themes. So I would definitely encourage them to reach out. And, you know, we always try to consult with folks in advance so that they don't get too far down the line of writing an application if it's not going to be a fit. Just have them reach out. Since we're working from home, as you can tell, and my dog is barking outside my window, I apologize. Email is the best way to get a hold of us. And I'll put my email address in the chat as well.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Wonderful, y'all. Well, I want to be respectful of time. Thank you, Stuart and Gary. Great question. Everybody, please be safe, be well. Thank you, Sammy and Ben, both for the work that led to this report and taking the time today to present it. This research is important, and so happy to be part of a team that's continuing to help push it out. And I hope all of you are able to access it. If you have any issues accessing it, please let us know. It is available on our website. Be safe, be well, and wear your mask. All right. Be well, everybody. Have a good one.